Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Liam and Olivia were always the kind of people the world seemed to have forgotten. No siblings, no family, no inheritance, no one to turn to. They grew up understanding from a very young age that if they wanted anything in life, they would need to achieve it with their own hands. And that's exactly what they did. Starting from scratch, they faced every obstacle life threw at them together. They never had luxury, never knew comfort, but what they built held value because it was the fruit of their sweat. She worked as an administrative assistant at a small transport company. The kind of simple job that, for her, represented stability, security, and above all, dignity. Liam was a forklift operator at a warehouse. His salary was modest too, but combined with hers, it was enough to get by. Rent paid, food on the table, bills up to date, and every now and then, they even allowed themselves a simple dinner or a cheap outing just to break the routine. It was a tight life, full of limitations, but a life they were proud to have built. The problem is that life has a cruel way of testing those who are already living on the edge. One random morning, while Olivia was organizing some documents, the manager of the transport company asked her to come to his office. At that moment, she didn't suspect a thing. After all, she had been there for years, always correct, dedicated, doing everything with great care. But as soon as she crossed the door and saw that envelope on the desk, her heart started racing. The manager's look said it all. He took a deep breath and began talking about cuts, about the crisis, about financial difficulties the company had been facing. And in the middle of so many empty justifications came the sentence, she was being dismissed. Holding back tears was impossible. She left the room with watery eyes, head down, avoiding eye contact. Each step toward the exit felt heavier than the last. The feeling was one of failure, of helplessness, of shame, even though she knew none of it was her fault. Coming home and facing Liam was even harder. She knew he would understand, knew he was also fighting to keep things going, but saying out loud that she was unemployed hurt more than she imagined. When she told him, Liam stayed silent for a few seconds, as if he'd been punched in the gut. He hugged Olivia tightly, held her face, and despite his trembling voice, said they would get through it. But deep down, they both knew this was more than just a temporary difficulty. Liam's salary alone wasn't enough to cover basic expenses. Rent, bills, groceries, everything added up to more than what he earned in a month. From that day on, conversations changed tone. Those talks about plans, about dreams, about simple things like renovating the house or replacing the old couch, all of that disappeared. The only thing dominating their conversations now were numbers, bills, deadlines, unpaid invoices, and money they didn't have to pay them. Nights stopped being moments of rest and turned into marathons of calculations, lost looks, and heavy silences. Sleeping became a challenge, waking up seemed even worse. Some days later. And as if all of that wasn't enough, the blow that truly knocked them down came. Liam arrived at work at the warehouse as he did every day. He went straight to the locker room, put on his uniform, checked his equipment, and headed to the loading area. Only, before he even started, the supervisor appeared, asking him to go to the office. The tone of voice didn't bring good news. And he already knew, even before hearing any words. Sitting in front of the manager, he heard exactly what he feared most. The company was going through a restructuring process, needed to cut costs, some contracts had been cancelled, and unfortunately, he was on the list of layoffs. They tried to soften the blow by saying that if the situation improved, they might call him back, but those words sounded empty, useless, almost mocking. Liam didn't argue, didn't ask for explanations, didn't beg. He took his documents, put them in his pocket, and walked out carrying a weight on his shoulders that felt impossible to bear. When he got home, Olivia noticed right away. Just looking at his face was enough to understand. Words didn't even need to be spoken. He simply sat on the edge of the sofa, put his hands over his face, and stayed like that for a few minutes. Olivia sat next to him and, for the first time in a long while, they cried together. But it wasn't a cry of relief or ordinary sadness. It was the cry of someone who feels crushed by life, who looks ahead and sees nothing but a huge hole, no way out, no solution, no light at the end. From that day on, everything changed. Eating became a math equation. Paying bills became an impossible mission. And more than that, that feeling of insecurity, of fear of the future, became a permanent guest in their home. What was once just worry turned into desperation. And when desperation knocks on your door, it doesn't ask permission. It just enters and settles in. The next day started differently. Liam and Olivia woke up with that anguish suffocating their chests, as if the air had become heavier. Eating something early seemed almost useless because their stomachs were completely shut down. They looked at each other and, without exchanging many words, already knew what they needed to do. They left the house with one goal in mind: find any job. There was no more room for choice, no more waiting for some ideal opportunity to appear. Whatever came up, they would accept. They went straight to a convenience store a few blocks away. Together, they entered, asked if they were hiring attendants, cleaning staff, anything. The response came quickly and dryly: "We've just filled the position." They didn't even look them in the eyes. The employee just pointed to the sign on the door, which had been taken down minutes earlier. They left in silence and went to a car wash. The owner looked them up and down, took a deep breath, and replied that he had hired 2 boys the previous week and, at the moment, didn't have space for anyone else. From there, they went to a pharmacy. They talked to the manager, handed over their resumes, and for a few seconds, even thought it might be different. He seemed interested, flipped through the papers, asked a few quick questions, but in the end, said that what they offered was a night shift for inventory restocking, but only one position. Olivia looked at Liam. He looked back. Both wanted to give way to the other, but at that moment, the manager added, "Actually, the position was filled yesterday, I just haven't taken down the ad yet." Hours passed, and with them, hope seemed to slip through their fingers. Every door they knocked on, every person they approached, every attempt, all ended with the same answers: "We're fully staffed, we're not hiring, leave your resume, we'll contact you if something opens up." They knew these were just polite ways of turning them down. The words were different, but the weight in their chests was always the same. The cruelest part was that as they walked the streets, they saw other people in the same situation. Faces marked by exhaustion, anguish, and fear. It was as if the world had turned into a competition where survival depended on having connections, privileges, or luck. Things Liam and Olivia never had. When the clock marked mid-afternoon, they decided to stop at a small local restaurant. As soon as they opened the door, they were greeted by a woman who, before even hearing what they had to say, blurted out, "If it's about a job, don't bother. I'm washing dishes myself because I can't afford to hire anyone." She spoke while holding a dish towel and trying to organize orders from a table at the same time. Her voice mixed exhaustion with sadness, as if she wanted to say she understood exactly what they were feeling but couldn't help. Tired, with sore feet, trembling legs, they sat for a few minutes on a bench in the square. Olivia held her face between her hands, breathing deeply, trying to hold back the tears. Liam stared at the ground, shaking his head, not knowing what to say. It was as if all of this was some kind of test, a cruel provocation from the universe, wanting to see how far they could go before breaking completely. And as if one last dose of pain was still missing that day, something happened that Olivia would never forget. While walking back home, she noticed an elderly woman sitting on the corner of the sidewalk, wearing torn clothes, holding a piece of cardboard as if it were a blanket. The woman trembled, held her stomach, visibly weak, hungry. Olivia looked at Liam, then reached into his pocket, pulled out the last coins they had saved, and crossed the street. She entered a bakery and bought a simple loaf of bread, the cheapest she could find. She returned to the woman and, without saying a word, placed the bread in her hands. For a few seconds, she watched the woman bite into that piece of bread as if it were the best meal in the world. A tear rolled down Olivia's face. She squeezed Liam's arm and said, "If we're going to fall, let it be while doing the right thing." He didn't respond. He just held her hand tightly, breathed deeply, and kept walking, carrying in his gaze a mix of pain, pride, and despair. They arrived home exhausted, both physically and emotionally. They barely exchanged words. Silence became the rule. They sat on the edge of the bed, staring into nothingness, thinking about how they had gotten to that point, trying to figure out where everything had gone wrong. The only certainty they had at that moment was that they couldn't give up. No matter how lost everything seemed, no matter how the whole world had closed its doors, they knew they had to find a way out somehow. The question was, how? 2 weeks passed since that day when Liam and Olivia felt the world collapse on their shoulders. And for people who already didn't have much, that time was enough to understand the true meaning of the word desperation. The pile of bills kept growing. The remaining money practically evaporated. The refrigerator seemed to reflect their own lives, empty, cold, and full of spaces that were once filled with security, tranquility, and dignity. They were exhausted. Every morning, they woke up weaker, more frightened, and no matter how hard they tried to support each other, there were moments when even a hug didn't seem to hold all that pain anymore. But when everything seemed lost, something unexpected happened. Liam's phone rang. He looked at the screen and, for a few seconds, couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was the company where he had worked as a forklift operator. His heart raced. He answered immediately. The person on the other end was direct. One of the employees had been fired, and since Liam had always been very good at what he did, they wanted him back immediately. For a few seconds, he stayed silent. A mix of relief, disbelief, and even a hint of fear took over. Fear it was a joke, fear it was some misunderstanding. But it was real. They offered him his position back. The salary hadn't changed, but for someone with overdue bills, it felt like the best news in the world. He hung up the phone, looked at Olivia, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, and before saying a word, she understood. He opened his arms, and she ran to him. They hugged each other tightly, as if holding on to their own lives. For the first time in days, they smiled. Waking up the next day tasted different. Liam put on the uniform he had stored away, laced up his boots, took a deep breath, and left the house determined. On the way to work, he tried to push away negative thoughts, tried not to remember the closed doors, the rejections, the looks of disdain he had received in recent days. He wanted to focus only on the fact that finally, a light had appeared in the middle of so much darkness. The first day was tough, as always. Heavy loads, tight schedules, demanding supervisors. But deep down, he felt grateful. He was tired, of course, but he felt that, at least for now, things were starting to align. On the second day, during a quick break, he decided to go to the break room to grab a coffee. And it was exactly there that something happened. Before even entering, he heard two voices talking. They were colleagues of his. They spoke softly, as if sharing a secret, but not so softly that they couldn't be overheard. Liam approached slowly, stood hidden, and that's when he heard the sentence that made his entire body freeze. "Man, did you hear about Liam's wife?" "Of course. She came here last week. Everyone saw her leaving Peterson's office. And, you know how Peterson is, he has no scruples." Liam's heart raced in a way he had never felt before. His hands started sweating, his breathing became short, as if there wasn't enough air. He held on to the edge of the wall to avoid losing balance. He stood still, listening to everything. And the two continued. "They say she practically begged for a job. And you know Peterson, nothing comes free with him. Yeah, and from what I heard, she was willing to do anything." Liam's mind spun. His throat felt like it was closing. This couldn't be true. It didn't make sense. Olivia? The woman who had always stood by him, who fought alongside him from the beginning, who went hungry with him, who cried with him, who rose with him, had she done something like that? Had she really? He stood there for a few minutes, trying to organize his thoughts. But the more he tried, the more lost he became. It was as if everything they had built was starting to crack right before his eyes. He left there, returned to his section, finished his shift on autopilot, not paying attention to anything he was doing. His body was there, but his mind was somewhere else. Every word he had heard echoed in his mind like a hammer strike. And no matter how hard he tried to convince himself it was just gossip from malicious people, a part of him felt there might be some truth hidden there. On the way home, the path seemed longer than ever. Each step was heavy, each corner darker, each passing car brought more anxiety. When he arrived in front of the house, he stood there for a few seconds staring at the door. He took a deep breath, tried to calm his heart, but it was impossible. As soon as he entered, Olivia was in the living room, going through some bills, trying to organize the chaos their life had become. Liam dropped the keys on the table, looked directly into her eyes, and went straight to the point, without beating around the bush, without half words. "Answer me one thing, were you at my workplace last week?" Her eyes widened instantly. The hand holding the paper trembled. Her face turned pale as if she had seen a ghost. For a few seconds, she tried to formulate a response, but her mouth seemed locked. And in that silence, Liam already felt something was very wrong. He squinted, took a deep breath, and added, "And what were you doing there, Olivia? Tell me. I want to hear it from your mouth." Her look, at that moment, said more than any words. She knew exactly what he was talking about. And at that moment, Liam realized that, whether he liked it or not, the truth was about to come out. And with it, perhaps, came a kind of pain he never imagined he could feel. She took a deep breath, bit her lips, and with a trembling voice, began to speak. "Yes. I was there." Tears started welling up in her eyes before she could finish the sentence. Liam squinted, crossed his arms, and kept his gaze fixed, waiting for her to say everything. And she continued, between sobs and a choked voice. I went to my old job. I begged them to give me my position back. I said I'd accept anything, any role, any salary, but they said no, that they were cutting costs and had no openings for anyone." She raised her hand to her face, wiped the tears, took a deep breath, and without being able to look directly at Liam, blurted out what seemed to weigh tons on her chest. "When I left there, I didn't know what else to do. I was desperate. And then I went to your old workplace." Her voice faltered. She squeezed her eyes shut, held back the tears for a few seconds, and added, "I went there, to see if they could hire you back. I tried, Liam. I swear I tried." Liam's heart felt like it was about to jump out of his chest. His hands trembled, his mouth went dry, and that lump in his throat felt impossible to swallow. "And what happened there, Olivia? Tell me clearly," he shot back, this time with a mix of anger, disbelief, and a tone he had never used with her before. She stuttered, placed her hand on her chest, as if trying to hold her own heart, and with a voice that was practically fading, completed, "I went to talk to Peterson. I explained that we were starving, that you needed that job back, that anything would do. And he listened to me, he looked at me, and then," she stopped, squeezed her eyes shut tightly, took a deep breath, and as if tearing a piece of her own body, blurted out, he said he could help, but, you know, it wouldn't come for free." Liam clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. "And did you accept?" he asked, unable to hide the tone of despair, mixed with anger and fear of the answer. Olivia shook her head, crying uncontrollably. "No. I didn't do it. I swear, Liam. When I realized what he wanted, I I got up and left. I left crying, feeling humiliated, feeling like trash, feeling like the worst person in the world. I didn't know what else to do. I just wanted to help you, to get our life back. Liam's chest felt like it was about to explode. He heard every word, every detail, but inside him, a battle raged. One part believed her. The other didn't know if it could. He turned his back, ran his hand over his face, took a deep breath, and blurted out, "I'm going to find out if this is true." He grabbed the car keys and left without looking back. He drove to work without even remembering the route. His hands trembled so much he could barely hold the steering wheel. As soon as he parked, he went straight to the manager's office. He entered decisively. He didn't knock. Peterson was there, sitting, looking over some papers, and when he saw Liam enter like that, he even tried to act casual, adjusting his posture, but his eyes immediately revealed he understood what was coming. Liam pulled out his phone, pressed the record button, and slipped it into his pocket, keeping his gaze steady, not looking away for a second. "I want you to tell me now. What happened between you and Olivia?" he demanded, dryly, directly, with the heavy tone of someone not there for games. Peterson looked up, took a deep breath, and instead of dodging, let out that cynical, mocking smile that only someone with absolutely no morals could display. He crossed his arms, leaned back in his chair, and responded with a calmness that bordered on provocation, "Yes, she came here. And, to be honest, she came begging for your job back. She came in humble, desperate, saying you guys were broke, jobless, with no way out. And, honestly, I was going to say no. I was going to leave you out, until she walked through that door." He paused briefly, looking Liam up and down, gauging the reaction before dropping the bomb. "But man, when I saw the beautiful woman you have, I changed my mind right then and there. I hired you back, just to be near her. Who knows, maybe one day she'll come back here to talk to me again, who knows, huh?" Liam's heart raced in a way that felt like it was ripping apart from the inside. His hands started trembling, his blood boiled, but he held firm, breathing deeply, fighting against the urge to cross the desk and take that guy out right there. And then, unable to hold back, he asked with a dry, angry, disgusted voice, "Did you sleep with her? Say it looking me in the eye. Did you sleep with her?" Peterson grinned even wider, leaned forward, rested his arms on the desk, and replied with the coldness of someone who thinks they're above consequences, "Not yet, but she'll be mine. You can count on that, man. She'll be mine. It's only a matter of time." In that second, Liam had to summon a strength he didn't know he had to keep from losing control. His clenched hands, his jaw tightened, his eyes filled with rage, hate, disappointment, everything at once. And while that piece of trash still flashed that dirty smile, Liam took a deep breath, gripped the phone even tighter in his pocket, and with a low, firm, cutting voice, replied, "Perfect. That's all I needed to hear." Without saying another word, he turned his back, opened the door, and left, leaving Peterson there, sitting, completely unaware that every word, every provocation, every second of that conversation had just been transformed into the strongest evidence against him. What that idiot didn't know, is that from that moment on, his life was about to collapse. Without wasting time, Liam went straight to the Human Resources Department. He asked to speak to upper management, said it was an extremely serious matter and couldn't wait. As soon as he entered the office, he placed the phone on the table and said, "Listen to this. And decide if this is the kind of employee you want here." What was heard in that room left everyone in shock. For the first few seconds, some exchanged glances, as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing. As the recording went on, faces turned serious, indignant, shocked. And when the recording ended, the silence was absolute. One of the directors, without saying a word, stood up, picked up the phone, and made a direct call to the legal department. Minutes later, Peterson was called in. As soon as he entered the room, he realized something was very wrong. The looks, the closed faces, the tension in the air, everything indicated that the situation had turned. And it turned ugly. Right there, he received the news that he was fired for harassment, unethical conduct, and a grave violation of company policies. He tried to justify himself, tried to talk, tried to flip the situation, but it didn't work. The evidence was clear, the words were there, every single one of them. Peterson was escorted to the door. In his hands, he carried a box with the few belongings from his desk, and on his back, the weight of shame, humiliation, and a stain on his career that he would never be able to erase. While watching all of this unfold, Liam felt a mix of relief, justice served, but at the same time, a tightness in his chest. Because, despite taking down that disgusting man, there was something much more complicated waiting for him at home. Something he didn't know if he had the strength to face. Liam left that room with his heart racing, but for the first time in days, with a lighter head. The weight of doubt, uncertainty, mistrust, seemed to start dissolving into thin air. He drove back home in silence, his mind full, but with a very clear certainty inside him. The love they had built over the years was stronger than any disaster, any evil, any provocation. As soon as he arrived, he opened the door and saw Olivia sitting on the couch, holding a glass of water, her eyes still swollen from crying so much. She didn't even have time to react. Liam went to her, knelt down, held her face between his hands, and with a trembling voice, blurted out, forgive me for doubting you, for letting that piece of trash plant doubts in my head. You tried to help me, you tried to save us, in the only way you could. I love you, and only now do I realize the kind of woman I have by my side." Olivia broke down in tears. She clung to Liam with all her strength, as if trying to merge with him, as if that hug could erase all the fear, all the pain, all the anguish of the past few days. They stayed there, hugging, crying together, but this time, crying out of relief, love, gratitude for still having each other, even after everything. In the days that followed, news of Peterson's firing spread throughout the company. And with it, recognition came too. Upper management not only thanked Liam for exposing that kind of behavior within the company but also realized that here was an upright, honest, courageous, and extremely committed man. And precisely because of that, 3 weeks later, they called Liam into the boardroom. And on that day, he heard the words he never imagined in his life, "Liam, we want to offer you the position of operations supervisor. Your work here has always been impeccable, and after what you did, we are certain you are the right person for this." His salary tripled. What once seemed impossible now became reality. Finally, they were able to catch up on all their bills. Paid the overdue rent, cleared their name, filled the fridge, paid off every bill that had been keeping them awake at night. And for the first time in their lives, they began experiencing something they had never done before, saving money. Months passed, years too, and that phase of suffering became just a distant memory. Today, they look back and realize that despite everything, it was those pains, those challenges, those falls that strengthened their love even more. Because those who have true love, may fall, but rise stronger than ever.
Suspicious of your wife or daughter-in-law? Don't go through what we saw in the video. Check the link in the comments and get the ebook with valuable tips and investigator-approved sites to clear your doubts.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.